Hello, everyone. Thank you to the Libertarian Party, Pat, Paul, Rob, Libertarian Party North Carolina, for allowing me to be here. For those who may not know, my name is Jp Cortez. I'm the Executive Director of the Sound Money Defense League. We lead the charge nationwide for sound money reforms at the state and federal level. As Executive Director of the organization for more than a decade, and a multi-time Mises U alum, I've spent my entire professional life in the trenches fighting for gold and silver as money, as constitutionally mandated. Money is something that most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about. But shouldn't we? People arrange their entire lives with money in mind. An individual who works 40 hours a week spends over a third of their waking hours working, toiling away, many at jobs they don't like or want to be doing. Some uproot their whole lives. They move across the country. They leave their families and their friends and the entire life they've known, all for the prospect of making more money in pursuit of wages that allow them to live a life that they want to live, or at least one with fewer financial headaches. Imagine working 40 hours a week for 50 years, dutifully setting away money for expenses, emergencies, and ultimately your retirement. You've been responsible. You've showed up for work on time every day. You've put up with certain coworkers who don't know how to deal with being in public with others. You've laughed at all your boss's unfunny jokes. You've worked with people who don't know how to show up on time or clean up in the shared kitchen. After decades of diligence and hard work, to say nothing of headaches and stress, you're finally settled and you put your nest egg away. Your family and your future are secure at last. And then, after years of grinding and working hard, right when you're about to retire, the government fires up its monetary press. And as a result, the nest egg, the savings that you've spent decades building, now buys only a fraction of what it once did. This isn't a hypothetical risk. It's already happened to millions of Americans in just the past few years. Between 2020 and 2025, overall prices were up about 25%, according to Consumer Price Index data. This means that the $100,000 retirement account or portfolio now only buys a fourth, has lost roughly a fourth of what it used to in just a few short years. After decades of blood, sweat, and tears, simple keystrokes by government bureaucrats watered down the purchasing power of each dollar that you earned, effectively stealing your retirement by diluting your money. 250 years ago, American colonists fought a revolution against taxation without representation. Today, on the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding, we find ourselves in the same place, being overwhelmingly taxed, both through actual taxes and the hidden tax that is inflation, and feeling further and further away from representation by our elected leaders. The founders knew intimately the dangers of paper money. That's why they wrote in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin and tender in the payment of debts. George Washington warned that paper money would ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice. Thomas Jefferson called paper money only the ghost of money and not money itself. That makes a lottery of all private property. Make no mistake, opting for unbacked paper money, despite a constitutional mandate of a money based in gold and silver, was not an accident. Central bankers and politicians intentionally chose to devalue the money that you spent decades saving. This is the actual state of the American economy today, and the system was designed this way. It was designed to enrich the wealthy and the elite. What I'm describing here are called Cantillon effects. This is the Austrian understanding of how inflation is not neutral. Cantillon effects refers to the uneven way that money enters, new money enters and spreads throughout an economy. When new money enters an economy through financial alchemy, like quantitative easing, or through deficit spending, those who first receive the money get to spend it before prices have adjusted. Big banks, corporations, government contractors, the wealthy, they receive all of this new money first. And then prices adjust. And by the time this money trickles down to the average person, prices have gone up. This speaks to how inflation is not neutral. It is a literal hidden transfer of wealth. The scenario that I've described is a product of a system engineered to enable short-term political actions at the expense of long-term stability. Untethering money from any guarantee of permanent value leaves every single currency holder vulnerable to devastating inflation. That's all of us. Everyone who denominates their life in US dollars is affected by this. Faced with this reality, urgent reforms are essential to restoring gold and silver. This egregious, systemic problem ultimately served as the impetus for the Sound Money Defense League. Fiat money is currency established by government decree or edict. This type of government-constructed and government-managed currency is completely unbacked by any physical asset and relies solely on the promises and the authority of its issuing government. This stands in clear contrast to sound money, to what is constitutionally called for. Gold and silver, which derive their value from inherent scarcity, historic stability, and market processes rather than political promises. This current system fails from an economic standpoint, but also from a moral one. This is a system that fundamentally steals from its people without our consent and many times without our knowledge. There's something inherently dishonest about a system like this. Money can and is created endlessly by government actors. This money is used to fund political ends without any voice or vote from those of us forced to rely on this money to hold its value. People devote their entire lives to building a savings cache that central bankers simply help themselves to by diluting the money. This deception actively harms individuals, not to mention society and the culture that permeates from it. A dishonest government breeds dishonest people. You have a society that lacks trust because the government can't be trusted. Today's economy presents currency holders with a trilemma, with no good options. With your money, you can instantly spend it. You can preserve as much of the purchasing power that you have left in the money before it has a chance to devalue. You can save it. You can store the money away and face the hidden tax that is inflation. Or you can invest it. You can throw your money into the risky stock market casino, which most Americans don't understand, and hope that your returns can outpace the rate of inflation. If it seems like workers are trapped in a cycle where their money isn't buying as much and their savings are vanishing, it's because they are. And the reward for complying with tyranny is greater tyranny. When we accept this form of monetary theft, it only invites more aggressive devaluation and inflation and control in the future. As Ludwig von Mises warned, sound money was devised as an instrument for the protection of civil liberties against despotic inroads on the part of governments. Ideologically, it belongs in the same class as political constitutions and Bill of Rights. What Mises is saying there is that as important as your right to assemble, as important as your right to own and bear firearms, as important as your right to due process is your right to sound money. And as an American, that is your constitutional birthright. An economy, a money based in gold and silver, trusted, reliable assets, not based on the kindness or benevolence of politicians. Murray Rothbard called inflation exactly what it is: legalized counterfeiting, a giant hidden tax that lets the political class steal from the productive without ever having to ask for a vote or having to raise taxes. The most visible inflation, or the most visible symbol of the theft is this. It's the Federal Reserve note that we're all forced to use, completely unbacked by anything of reality since 1971. In a country of abundance of choices in virtually every sector of life, Americans have almost no say over the money they use. There's a car for all terrain, there's clothes for every occasion and all styles, there's shoes for comfort or sport and the like. And yet, when it comes to money, you have almost no say. No one woke up this morning and said, I affirmatively choose the US dollar because it has monetary properties that I agree with. The government's unbacked paper money is imposed by force, while alternatives like gold and silver are hamstrung, pushed to the sidelines, kept away through taxes and regulations. This is an important point. The gold standard did not fail on its own accord, and the gold standard did not die a natural death. The gold standard was killed, undone by dishonest politicians who cannot stand honest money. Historically, ancient civilizations have settled on gold and silver as the basis of money, not through executive order or through an act of Congress, but through voluntary exchange and market forces. In a 1984 interview, F.A. Hayek said, "The great trouble with money was that it was not allowed to develop. I have come to the position of asking, has monetary policy ever done any good? I don't think that it has. I think that it has done only harm. That's why I'm now pleading for what I have called the denationalization of money." Forward-thinking U.S. states have already grasped the gravity of this situation and have taken effective action. No longer are they waiting for permission from Washington, D.C. In more than a decade, the Sound Money Defense League has grown to tens of thousands of supporters across every state in the country. Our mission is to remonetize gold and silver, primarily by removing the taxes, regulations, disincentives, and friction around the buying, selling, and using of gold and silver. To that end, dozens of states have enacted pro-sound money measures, proving that the restoration of sound money is not just a pipe dream. This is not something relegated to the Constitution and esoteric conversations. This is something that's happening, unfolding today as we speak. We've worked successfully in the majority of states represented in this room today to work and to pass and to enact pro-sound money reforms, or to stop bad sound money reforms. The success of this policy movement doesn't rely on me, and it doesn't rely on the Sound Money Defense League. More than anything, it relies on individuals. It relies on you. Concerned in-state activists are the most important tool that we have in any legislative battle. By taking action, calling your state, your capital, writing letters and emails, showing up at hearings, advocates become soldiers in the fight for sound money. You may not have a lot of power in D.C. If you write an email or you make a phone call, you might get a form letter back. You might not get any response at all. And so I understand why political efficacy is at an all-time low when you think about federal politics. But that's not true at the state level. From Montgomery to Salem to Juneau to Raleigh to Columbus to Lincoln to Baton Rouge. In these state capitals, you still have an enormous amount of power. I encourage you to take that power and use it. Libertarians have rightfully led on important issues for decades. Let's not forget that it was just Barack Obama not that long ago who campaigned and won a Democratic primary and the President of the United States by saying that marriage was a union between one man and one woman. Let's not forget that libertarians have led on the war on drugs. And importantly, libertarians have led on war. Libertarians understand the direct relation between easy money and a state's capacity and propensity to fight wars of choice. Again, libertarians are faced with an opportunity to lead on issues before members of either major party even consider an alternative to big government, wholesale theft of its citizenry, or endless wars of choice. I don't need to tell the people in this room, but the greatest living advocate for sound money in the world is Ron Paul. Dr. Paul knew the dangers of paper money, the same way our nation's founders knew the dangers of paper money. On election night in 2012, after campaigning for months on the importance of sound money, and ending the Federal Reserve, of course, the price of gold was $1,715 an ounce. 14 years later, the price of gold is above $4,500 an ounce, a 162% increase. The price of gold, denominated in dollars, is important because it allows us to clearly see the theft that is taking place. It takes nearly 3 times as many dollars today as it took to buy the same ounce of gold 14 years ago. The price of gold is not going up. The purchasing power of your dollar is being siphoned away and stolen. This creates a massive, catastrophic, systemic problem that goes beyond the daily struggles to afford basic necessities. Those exist, to be sure. Food insecurity is at an all-time high, financial insecurity. The basic necessities, the capacity and ability to afford things like rent and medicine and food and transportation, all of that is more precarious than it has been at any time in recent history. Without sound money, individuals and businesses can't afford to make long-term plans either. Developing infrastructure, building bridges, developing water transportation, schools, churches, hospitals, or even saving for retirement. When the value of your money is uncertain, these things become impossible, as is the case in places like Venezuela or Zimbabwe or Sudan. The same problem exists here in the United States, albeit more gradually. Importantly, there's no reason that the grave circumstances facing those countries can't happen here. The US is not immune to the harms wrought by currency debasement. And so as we can see, stable money is a necessary condition for the progression of society. This underscores the importance of honest money and highlights the massive urgency facing us today to reinstitute systems that do not require the kindness or benevolence of politicians or the all-knowing insights of central planners. Maybe we don't need complex formulas or regressions. Maybe we don't need dot plots or quantitative easing or forward guidance or CBDCs. Maybe what we need has been there all along, prescribed in the US Constitution from the very beginning, if we would only heed the lessons learned and taught to us by those who came before us. The inescapable reality that paper currencies have an expiration date demands immediate action from all levels of government. States are charting the path forward by championing sound money, gold and silver. The future of America's money should not be more top-down approaches and government monetary systems. By re-implementing sound money and restoring a link between America's money and reality, we're restoring a sound economic future for our families, for our communities, for our progeny, one with fewer wars, more economic opportunities, and more societal cohesion. Leviathan will continue to grow unimpeded, if not for great effort from everyone in this room. I hope you'll join me in rolling up your sleeves. There's a lot of work to be done, and we, as individuals attuned to the massive failure that is the US monetary system, and the ones with an understanding of the solution, are the ones tasked with doing it. Always remember that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. I encourage all of you to be rabid in your pursuit for liberty. Come and fight with me. Thank you.